Greetings! In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to log in as an admin facilitator. If you haven't already, you can download Acadicus by going to our homepage, Support, Download. You can check on your hardware requirements to make sure you have the right compatible Windows PCs for VR or non-VR mode, and you can also check the internet requirements there as well. Assuming everything is in alignment, you can click on Download by entering your email address, and it'll download the installer. Once you've installed Acadicus, this is the very first screen that'll pop up when you launch it. If you have a VR headset configured, you can go into VR mode. You'll see that option available. We're going to go into non-VR mode. It's generally easiest for an admin facilitator to be in non-VR mode when they're facilitating a scenario. Choose your microphone. Guests or other participants in the scene or learners can just log in as a guest account, so they won't have access to all the admin tools. They're just in as a learner that can complete a scenario. If you're the facilitator, you're going to need those tools, so we're going to log in as a lab admin. Don't check the Enterprise Server button, enter the user ID and password as it was given to you, and hit login. On this screen, you could choose to enter the Acadicus Commons, but just keep in mind you might run into people from other schools or hospitals. And we're soon launching a tutorial that'll show you how to teleport and navigate and pick things up in VR mode. We're going to enter into a private lab ID and hit Join Lab. The guest users that would also be joining your simulation would use that same lab ID, and as long as you're all logged into the same lab, you'll all see and hear each other. Whatever scene configuration you loaded last will be the one that loads up the next time you enter Acadicus. Once we're here, we can mute our mic if we'd like to, and we can click on this question mark for helper graphics to see how to move around in non-VR mode. Pretty simple controls, W, A, S, and D keys to move around if we want to go left, right, up, or down. If you hold down Shift, you'll go faster. If you want to look to the right, you can right-click and drag. Or if you're using a trackpad or the right-click doesn't work, you can just hold down Control and move your mouse to look around the scene. And then you just use your left-click to interact with objects. I'm going to close my helper graphics. And if I click on the menu button down below, this menu pops up, and I can click on my Scenes button, and I can see this is my current tab. My current scene that's loaded is the forebay. Any scenes that you've customized would show up in your library, but what you're going to probably be looking for is the Templates tab. These are going to be the templates that we've loaded into your scene for you, and if you don't see any here, we can load those for you. Otherwise, you can download those content packs in VR mode. So when you're ready to load a new scene configuration into your lab, you can select it, and on the right you can see the option to load. Once I click load, this will load the scenario for everyone in the scene. So if you've got other guest participants that are joining you, they'll also see this loading screen appear. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at the OpenRN Cardiac Med Administration scenario. On our home page, you can go to the Nursing tab and click on the OpenRN scenarios. These are 25 scenarios that are in development in collaboration with OpenRN, which is a grant-funded project funded by the Department of Education, and each of the scenarios has a scenario plan. So in this particular case, we can get an overview and the learning objectives, and we're going into this cardiac medication. So if I click on this, I can see the entire scenario plan for this particular simulation. I can see the setup, I can see the different states, expected student behaviors, prompts and teaching points, debriefing questions, a survey that they'd like you to fill out so they can get feedback on how we can continue to improve the scenarios, as well as scenario rubric and feedback. Keep in mind that these scenarios are fully configurable, customizable. So you could completely change this up and change the patient, change the environment. This one is organized around this particular scenario. If you want to become invisible to the other participants in the scene, if you're a facilitator, you can click on your multiplayer menu and then go into ghost mode. Now your avatar will not appear and you're invisible to the other participants, and from there you can facilitate, you could play the role of the patient, you can change other variables using your simulation manager. You access that by clicking your menu, going to simulation manager, and if I click on this little button here, I can see all the things that I can configure. So I could change the time on the clock. I could use this voice panel if I wanted to have pre-recorded things for the patient.
Where am I?
Or I can select the patient. Once I have them selected, I see a green outline. Only I see that green outline. The participants would not see that. So I can change things here, configure things like putting a mask on, removing his shirt, having his blanket on or off. We can change his wrist ID. We can have him shaking his head. In this particular case, he becomes combative or upset and really needs to be de-escalated. So we've got to use therapeutic communication skills to calm him down. We can have him relax his arms, maybe turn his head and look at us. And has very basic facial expressions. Now keep in mind, every single simulation manager is going to be different. Some of them are going to be far more complex with a lot more options, and some of them are going to be pretty simple. We can change his vital signs here, change his heart rate, change his blood pressure, and hit set values. For the learner, they'll be able to interact by taking the blood pressure and doing various activities in the scenario. In this case, we have the medical record on the wall here. And again, this aligns with the scenario plan that's on the website for OpenRN. So if we click on our menu, click on scenes, we can go back to our templates and load up a different scenario. Now keep in mind that we're still in the same lab. We haven't left our private lab, but we're just changing the scene configuration. So the lab is something of a holodeck that can be transformed into a variety of different types of environments. In this particular case, we have the learning objectives out here, as well as the medical records, so we can review that before we go in to meet the patient. And this is a whole different configuration for a different scenario based on a pediatric pain scenario. So we've got the Wong-Baker scale, different medical record, different objectives. And in this case, we'll have a different simulation manager as well. So that gives you a sense of how to get started with basic facilitation as an administrator in Acadicus. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at info@acadicus.com.